Mercedes are not panicking because Ferrari found a faster car. Mercedes are panicking because Ferrari may have found something far more dangerous. A weak point in the rulebook. A weak point in the governing body's patience. And maybe, the first real crack in the advantage Mercedes have been protecting since the start of the season. Because before the Austrian Grand Prix, Ferrari did not just arrive with questions. They arrived with history, evidence, and a memory Mercedes could not erase. Ferrari had already been forced to remove a similar diffuser idea from its own car before the season even began. So when Maranello looked at the Mercedes W16 and saw a jagged diffuser extension sitting in one of the most sensitive areas of the car, this was never going to stay quiet. This was not jealousy. This was not noise. This was revenge dressed as a technical clarification. And now Mercedes are facing the possibility of losing a hidden upgrade right before one of the most important weekends of the season, while Toto Wolff is left furious because Ferrari may have turned its own winter punishment into a weapon. Subscribe to the channel. To understand why this story has shaken Mercedes so badly, you have to forget the image of Formula One as only drivers, overtakes, tire strategy, and race wins. Because the real fight here began in a place fans rarely see. Not on the straight. Not in the braking zone. Not in a dramatic battle through turn 1. It began underneath the car. Low at the rear. Hidden in the airflow. In a part of the machine that most people would walk past without noticing, but every top engineer would study like a crime scene. The diffuser. That word sounds technical, but the idea is simple. The diffuser helps air leave from under the car. When that air leaves cleanly, the car gets pushed down into the track. That gives the driver more grip, more confidence, more freedom to attack corners without feeling the rear of the car slide away. Think of it like running across a wet kitchen floor. With smooth shoes, every step feels risky. You move carefully. You hold back. You do not trust your own feet. But with shoes that grip, everything changes. You still have the same legs, the same body, the same floor. But suddenly, you can move faster because you trust the contact beneath you. That is what good aerodynamic grip can do for a Formula One driver. It gives trust. And trust becomes speed. Now imagine that trust coming from a tiny jagged edge at the rear of the car. A serrated diffuser extension. A sharp, stepped, sawtooth-like detail designed to manage the air in a more clever way. Not a huge visible part. Not something casual fans would immediately point at. But in the world of Formula One, tiny shapes can carry enormous consequences. A small change in airflow can change the balance of the car. A small improvement in rear stability can protect the tires. A small gain through fast corners can become a major difference over a race distance. That is why Ferrari noticed. And that is why Mercedes had a problem the moment Ferrari noticed. Because Ferrari were not looking at the Mercedes car like ordinary spectators. They were looking at it like a team that had already been burned. Before the season began, during the pre-season technical checks, Ferrari had its own diffuser idea examined. And the governing body did not accept it. Ferrari were told to remove that specification from the car before the championship properly started. That matters more than it sounds. When a team loses a part before the first race, it is not just losing carbon fiber. It is losing months of thinking. It is losing a path of development. It is losing a piece of the car's intended personality. The engineers do not simply shrug and move on. They remember. They remember the wording. They remember the explanations. They remember where the line was drawn. Ferrari entered the season knowing exactly how painful that boundary could be. So when Mercedes later appeared with a serrated diffuser concept on the W16, Ferrari saw something much bigger than an aerodynamic trick. They saw a door they had been told was closed. And Mercedes appeared to be standing right beside it. This is where the story becomes dangerous. Because Ferrari were not saying, Mercedes have definitely copied us. They were asking something more powerful. Why were we forced to remove our idea, while Mercedes are allowed to keep theirs? That question is explosive. Not because it instantly proves guilt. It does not. The source material makes clear that the Mercedes version was initially considered technically compliant because its exact design and geometry were different from Ferrari's rejected version. But in Formula One, that does not end the story. It starts the war. Because when one team is told no, and another team is told yes, while both concepts seem to live in the same family of ideas, the entire paddock starts listening. The question becomes less about one shape. It becomes about consistency. Is the same rule being applied the same way? Is the limit clear? Or is one team finding shelter in details that another team was not allowed to use? That is the kind of question no governing body wants to face in public. And it is exactly the kind of question Ferrari knew how to ask. During the Canadian Grand Prix weekend, Ferrari's engineers observed the Mercedes solution. The component had appeared on the cars of George Russell and Kimi Antonelli, and Ferrari did not treat it as a harmless detail. They went to the governing body. They requested a formal clarification. That phrase sounds calm, almost boring. But inside Formula One, a formal clarification can be a weapon. It means one team is forcing the sports referee to explain a rival's design. It means the private language of engineers becomes a public pressure point. It means Mercedes can no longer just run the part quietly and let the stopwatch speak. Now the rulebook had entered the race. And once the rulebook enters, everything changes. Mercedes' position was understandable. They believed they had worked within the process. They had developed the car in conversation with the governing body. They had reason to believe what they had done was legal. From their side, this was not a team hiding something in a dark corner. This was innovation inside the accepted boundaries. But Ferrari's position had emotional force. Ferrari had already paid the price. Ferrari had already removed a similar type of idea. Ferrari had already been told where the danger zone was. So when Mercedes seemed to gain performance from that same sensitive region, Maranello had no reason to stay quiet. And this is the first place where Mercedes could feel the panic begin. Because this was not a protest from a team that did not understand the area. This was a challenge from a team that understood it too well. Ferrari had lived through the rejection. Ferrari had studied the reasons. Ferrari had seen the difference between a concept that fails and a concept that survives. That made their questions sharper. And it made Mercedes' defense more complicated. Because Mercedes could not simply say, "You do not understand the part." Ferrari did understand. Maybe better than anyone else. But here is the twist most fans miss. The first clarification did not simply hurt Mercedes. It helped Ferrari. Because when the governing body explains why one version is legal and another is not, it gives teams a map. It shows them where the edge is. It shows which features are too aggressive. It shows which details might still be allowed. Ferrari had lost its first idea. But now Ferrari had information. And information in Formula One can be worth lap time. So Ferrari moved quickly. Instead of just complaining, Ferrari developed its own legal version of the serrated diffuser concept. A version that respected the boundary as they now understood it. A version that could be placed on the car without repeating the mistake from winter. And then came Barcelona. That race changed the mood around Ferrari. Lewis Hamilton won for the Scuderia. His first victory with Ferrari. A result that did more than add points. It changed the feeling inside the team. Before that win, Ferrari were chasing. Pushing. Trying to prove the car had life. Trying to prove Mercedes could be reached. After Barcelona, everything felt different. The Ferrari upgrade package had worked. The car had taken a victory. Hamilton had given Maranello belief. Charles Leclerc was still in the wider fight. And suddenly, the team did not look like it was shouting from weakness. It looked like it was attacking from momentum. That is a very different thing. A desperate protest can be ignored. A protest from a team that just won becomes much harder to dismiss. And Ferrari knew it. That is why the diffuser story did not stop with the first answer. Reports described an intense exchange between Ferrari and the governing body in the weeks leading toward Austria. Ferrari continued asking where the true limit was in this aerodynamic area. They were not just trying to understand the rule. They were pressing the rule until it had to respond. And eventually, the response became much more serious. Teams were reportedly instructed to remove the serrated diffuser extensions, with the Austrian Grand Prix becoming the possible enforcement point. That is the moment Mercedes' calm would have started to break. Because there is a huge difference between being told, your part is legal, and being told, the interpretation has changed and you may need to remove or revise it immediately. The first creates confidence. The second creates chaos. And chaos is exactly what a championship-leading team does not want. Mercedes had built the early part of the season on control. Strong results. A powerful points position. A car that looked mature and consistent. Drivers who could deliver. A garage that had the rhythm of a team expecting to fight at the very front every weekend. Ferrari did not need to destroy that rhythm completely. They only needed to disturb it. That is the hidden power of this story. Even if the serrated diffuser was not worth a massive amount of lap time, the disruption around it could still hurt. Mercedes would have to review replacement parts, adjust setup plans, rethink balance, and potentially run the car in a different aerodynamic condition than expected. And in Formula One, the car is not a collection of separate pieces. It is a chain. Pull one link, and the tension moves everywhere. Remove something from the rear floor, and the rear wing might need adjusting. Change the rear stability, and the driver might brake differently. Change the way the car handles the tires, and the strategy might shift. Change the confidence level, and suddenly an aggressive driver becomes a careful one. That is why Toto Wolff would be furious. Because from the Mercedes side, this would feel like Ferrari had weaponized procedure. Mercedes believed they had developed inside the rules. They believed the governing body had given them assurances. They believed the car was legal. Then Ferrari applied pressure, and the ground under that belief started moving. For a team principal, that is not just frustrating. It is dangerous. Because Formula One teams can accept being beaten by a faster car. They can accept losing a race because of strategy, tire wear, or driver error. Those things hurt, but they are part of the sport. What they hate is uncertainty. A moving boundary. A rule interpretation that seems safe one week, then becomes risky the next. That is what creates panic inside a technical department. Not wild shouting. Not chaos in the garage. Real panic in Formula One is quieter. It is engineers recalculating plans late into the night. It is managers asking whether a replacement part can be fitted in time. It is drivers wondering whether the car they practiced in simulation will feel different on track. It is a team principal realizing a rival has forced them onto the defensive without needing to overtake them first. And that is exactly what Ferrari had done. They had made Mercedes defend. Defend the part. Defend the process. Defend the interpretation. Defend the idea that their advantage was earned cleanly and consistently. But Ferrari were not finished. Because while Mercedes were trapped in the diffuser controversy, Ferrari had another storyline building underneath the surface. The power unit. Under the new regulations, there was a system designed to help manufacturers that were behind in engine performance. If a power unit was measured as being more than a certain percentage behind the leading unit, the manufacturer could receive extra development opportunities. Ferrari reached the highest level of that system. In simple terms, the Ferrari engine was considered far enough behind in one key area that they were allowed extra chances to improve it during the season. That sounds like good news. But it also tells you something painful. Ferrari were not starting from a position of total strength. They were fighting with a car that had needed aerodynamic development and engine assistance just to close the gap. They were trying to rebuild competitiveness from multiple directions at once. The first engine-related update was scheduled for Austria. Ferrari were careful not to oversell it. The message from their side was measured. The update was described as relatively minor, and not something that would change the competitive order by itself. That is important. Because the real story is not that Ferrari found one magic solution. The real story is that Ferrari were stacking small advantages. A legal diffuser concept. A successful upgrade direction. Hamilton's Barcelona victory. A political push against Mercedes diffuser. A power unit development path opening for Austria and beyond. Individually, each piece might sound manageable. Together, they start to look like pressure from every angle. And Mercedes could see that. That is why this moment before Austria felt so intense. Mercedes were still leading. But Ferrari were no longer just chasing on the stopwatch. They were challenging the shape of the fight itself. On track, Ferrari wanted more speed. Off track, Ferrari wanted the governing body to draw a stricter line. In the engine war, Ferrari wanted the gap to close. In the political war, Ferrari wanted Mercedes to feel watched. That combination is what turns confidence into doubt. And doubt is poison for a team that has been used to control. But Red Bull added another layer, and this is where the story becomes even more complicated. Red Bull challenged the power unit measurements that gave Ferrari extra development opportunity. That meant Ferrari's engine progress was not happening in peace either. The same week Ferrari were pressuring Mercedes over aerodynamics, Ferrari were also facing pressure from Red Bull over engine development. This is Formula One at its most ruthless. Nobody is allowed a clean path. Ferrari attack Mercedes. Red Bull attack the power unit system. Mercedes defend its car. The governing body becomes the center of multiple fights at once. And the Austrian Grand Prix turns from a race weekend into a political battlefield. This is why the phrase Mercedes panics is not really about fear in the ordinary sense. Mercedes are not afraid of Ferrari as a name. They are afraid of momentum. They are afraid of a rival discovering how to make every Mercedes advantage more expensive to keep. Because once Ferrari proved it could win in Barcelona, every technical question became more threatening. Before the win, Mercedes could look at Ferrari and think, they still have to catch us. After the win, Mercedes had to think, what if they are close enough now that one removed part matters? That changes everything. When the gap is big, politics feels like noise. When the gap is small, politics becomes performance. A tiny aerodynamic loss can affect qualifying. A small balance shift can change tire wear. A delayed replacement part can compromise a weekend. A driver losing confidence can turn a podium into damage limitation. That is the world Mercedes were staring at before Austria. And Ferrari knew the timing was perfect. Austria is a circuit where the lap is short. That means margins can compress. A small loss can show up brutally, because there are fewer corners to recover from weakness and less distance to hide imperfections.